Hello and welcome to the Frans van Kat interview. I'm Annette Young. Last week's elections in Tunisia saw the Ennahda party win more than 40% of the vote. However, it's a party that poignantly calls itself an Islamic one, not an Islamist party, thanks to the negative connotations. And in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood looks set to gain a significant number of votes in the upcoming elections. So is the Arab Spring turning into an Islamist autumn? Here to answer this today is Mathieu Guidère, a professor at Toulouse University who specialises in Islamist movements. Mathieu Guidère, thank you so much for being with us. First of all, I'm going to ask you about a news story which is very much dominating the headlines at the moment here in France, and I'm talking about, of course, the firebombing of the Paris office of the satirical weekly Charlie Hebdo. Now, this came after it published a spoof issue, guest-edited by the Prophet Muhammad, to salute Ennahda's victory in Tunisia. While we don't know for certain who's actually responsible for the incident, it certainly shows or reveals the sort of polarised status of Islam in France, doesn't it?
Yeah, we are living sensitive times now because of these. Nobody was expecting that the Islamists won this democratic elections. But I think that we should be very careful about such events because we don't know if there is no instrumentation, no manipulation. We don't know who, but obviously everybody will think that there are Islamists who have done this, but it could be some extremists from the rightist left, it could be anybody else to express to the French government something or to tell to the people something. In all cases, we should be very careful in these times about such events.
And it shows, however, that what's happening in the Arab world really does have an impact across Europe.
Absolutely. It has an impact, especially, look, for example, at these elections in Tunisia, you will see that they have the same score, the same people who voted in France, the Tunisian who voted in France, gave almost the same results than the Tunisian who voted in Tunisia. Means the Islamist party, the Islamic party, Ennahda, came in the first place also in France than in Tunisia.
So is Ennahda's success a disappointment for the forces of democracy?
I think it's a failure for the forces of democracy in Tunisia, especially because they made a lot of errors. There were more than 100 parties in front of this unique Islamic party, and every democratic person wanted to be elected to this constitutional election. So this was a strategic and strategic problem when handling these elections. And the other problem is that these democratic individuals and parties have no people behind in every town, in every village in Tunisia.
They were very well organised.
Yeah, they were very well organised, and they have the historical background, the people background with them in this country and in the other countries also.
Do you believe that they will be able to fulfil their promise of being a moderate Islamic government?
This would be the challenge, and this will be very difficult by the times we are living, because there is an economic crisis now, and the expectations of people, especially in Tunisia, are huge. So you can never fulfill huge expectations, especially of revolutionary people, when they want to remove everything, to change everything of what they have known since decades. It's very difficult to fulfill these expectations. But the good news is that the Islamists won't be able to fulfill all these expectations. So it's good news on the medium term or on the long term for the Democrats and for all the democratic parties.
But it is interesting, given that its leadership, in particular Rachid Ghannouchi, actually lived abroad. They lived in Europe. They've been exiled there for decades. Do you think that might also have had an impact on the way that he and his members feel about the way one should govern?
Exactly. The fact that these leaders, the main leaders, the major leaders of these parties, and especially of the Tunisian party, Ennahda, lived abroad. They lived in one of the major democracies in the world, which is Great Britain, and most of them lived in Great Britain or France. So it's a system, democratic system. They saw how it works, and they saw that it works, actually. So they have this discourse of someone who knows how democracy works.
So you believe their views as a result have modified?
Their views, I think, have modified by experiencing democracy, because it's different to have a theoretical idea about democracy, to think that democracy is elections, and to live democracy. It's very different. These leaders have lived the democratic experience. Their people haven't lived the democratic experience, and that's the problem, I think, for the future, is this
disconnect.
Yeah, the disconnection between the leaders and the elite of these parties who lived the democratic experience, and the people and the base, the popular base of these parties who have expectations that has nothing to do with democracy and that are more populist than democratic.
Now, neighbouring Libya, in the first keynote speech to be given after the liberation of the country, the NTC leader, Mustafa Abdel Jalil, surprised everybody, particularly his Western backers, by saying a new constitution would embrace elements of Sharia law. Were you surprised by that?
No, I wasn't surprised because of the person, the individual himself. He is Minister of Justice, which means in Libya that he is someone specialist in Islamic religious, because a Minister of Justice in Islamic countries is specialist in Sharia. So it's normal that the person who is specialist in Sharia goes for Sharia. The second thing is historical, because in Libya, Sharia was applied and was put into application, but Gaddafi himself in 1993, and it was also put in the constitution of 1969 of Gaddafi himself. Article 2 explicitly it says the same thing. Sharia is the constitution of Libya. So it's just a normalization of the situation, and it's a political sign to the wing, the Islamist wing, who took part, a huge part, to the liberation of Libya, and he having the choice than announcing that he will extend the application of Sharia in Libya.
But is it not the case that in the Arab world, many see Islam as defining their personal and political identities?
Yeah, that's the major consequence and the major idea about this revolutions. People are asking their identities, and they are defining more and more their identity as an Islamic identity, as a Muslim identity, because they have defined it for decades as with the Arab nationalism. The Arab nationalism was the major ideology which was governing these countries, and it failed. They defined it as liberal, it failed. They defined it as socialist, it failed. They defined it even as communist countries, and it failed. So now they have these ideas that the Muslim identity, the Islamic identities, maybe will give them some solutions for the future and will better their lives.
But, I mean, the other thing which is sort of not surprising either is the fact that many of these Islamist groups were often the sort of strong voice of opposition against autocratic leaders. So
yeah, this is about credibility and legitimacy of the opposition. These groups has the legitimacy, the historical legitimacy. None of them has taken part to the government. They were always in the opposition. They have always a completely different system to propose to these people. So now they are gaining the fruits of this historical opposition.
So should we be worried in the West about the rise of Islamism in the Arab world as a result of the Arab Spring?
I think no, because one of the major victories of the West in this whole movement is that even the Islamists, even the radical, accepted the democratic game. They entered the democratic game, and this is one of the major victories of the democratic world, of the Western democracies. So my worry is only about this difference between the elite and the base, because if the popular base will put the pressure on these elite leaders, the elite leaders, if they put pressure on them, it could lead to some of different or against the civil rights or against the human rights. And there we should be very vigilant about it. And
well, particularly when it comes to the rights of women.
yeah, this is the most important. But note that also Ennahda is supported by a lot of women who considers that Ennahda, the Islamic party, the Muslim party, defends their rights better than the other parties. So you have also in these Muslim Islamic parties, you are with the dilemma of women defending this fact. So you can't say it's men's parties and we should defend these women. You will have in front of you women who will defend their Islamic choice of an ideological, different ideological choice. So
what you're saying, it's now for those living in those countries to be vigilant as such, to see that these governments well and truly can, perhaps as everybody keeps quoting the great example of Turkey where you blend democracy with Islam, that they do indeed fulfil their promises on that score. Yeah, I think that it's to the people of this country to be vigilant, to the people of this country who struggled for their liberty, to struggle for their liberty if the Islamists impose another dictatorship or if they impose something they don't like. As for the West, for the Western democracies, we should be vigilant about only two things. The violence, we shouldn't accept any violence against anybody. I insist on this point. This is the red line. No violence against anyone. And of the minorities, no violence against the minorities. For the other, they should adapt their system to the human rights. They should adapt to the system on their way. They do whatever they want with their legislation since they respect the human rights and the civil liberties. Mathieu Guidez, I'm afraid that's all we're going to have time for. Thank you for being with us today. And that's it for this edition of the France 24 interview. Stay tuned for more news and headlines, which are coming up shortly.